是文昌，华山请讲。文昌明白。讲。明白。381讲。1动5讲。明白。讲。明白。讲。明白。讲。明白。讲。明白。我是文昌，景山请讲。文昌明白。3动讲。明白。3讲。明白。讲。明白。讲。明白。讲。明白。讲。明白。各号注意，我是文昌，1分钟准备。50秒。40秒。30秒。20秒。10、9、8、7、6、5、4、3、2、1，点火。起飞。T0 2动时58分51秒，6动9毫秒；2动时58分51秒，6动9毫秒。各号注意，第2次综合检查停。
各号注意，我是文昌，收集第2次综合检查 及30分钟准备情况。景山。
景山明白。
华山。
华山明白。
丽水。
第二次自我检查正常，30分钟完毕。
龙楼。
龙楼明白。
铜鼓岭。
铜鼓岭明白。
西沙。
西沙明白。
青蓝。
青蓝明白。
龙楼讲。
龙楼2次号第二次自我检查正常，30分钟准备完毕。
明白。
文昌西沙报告。
西沙讲。
西沙第二次自我检查正常，30分钟准备完毕。
明白。
文昌青蓝报告。
青蓝讲。
青蓝4号30分钟准备完毕。
明白。我是文昌，华山请讲。
华山第二次自我检查正常，30分钟准备完毕。
文昌明白。
文昌我是景山。
我是文昌，景山请讲。
景山天路三亚第二次自我检查正常，30分钟准备完毕。
文昌明白。
文昌铜鼓岭报告。
铜鼓岭讲。
铜鼓岭第二次自我检查正常，30分钟准备完毕。
明白。北京文昌报告。全区各号30分钟准备完毕。1号文昌报告。全区各号30分钟准备完毕，请示由动摇下达，15分钟准备及后续口令。文昌明白。各号注意，沟通动摇与文昌门次调度。龙楼。铜鼓岭。
文昌动摇报告。
我是文昌，动摇请讲。
阵地30分钟，准备好。
文昌明白。各号注意，即将下达15分钟准备口令。15分钟准备口令下达后，各号调度打通波，设备处于等待状态，无异常情况不再报告。各号是否明白？丽水。龙楼。 铜鼓岭、西沙、青兰、东幺，我是文昌。
东幺到，文昌起讲。
全区各号30分钟准备完毕，15分钟准备及后续口令由你下达。
东幺明白。各号注意，15分钟准备。
15分钟准备。
各号注意，第3批人员撤离。 将。明白。各号注意，10分钟准备。
10分钟准备。
Welcome to our special coverage of China's latest space mission, the launch of Tianzhou-6. Now you're watching live footage from Wenchang in Hainan province. China will soon send a cargo ship loaded with supplies to its Tiangong space station. The launch of Tianzhou-6 will be the first space flight since China's space station entered into the application and development stage. Now, the cargo ship is expected to be launched at 21:22 Beijing time. That's minutes away from now. It's carried by a Long March 7 Y6 rocket from the Wenchang Spacecraft Launch Site. And now supplies on board will include 70 kilograms of fresh fruits, about twice the amount delivered by the Tianzhou-5 cargo ship. And now, following the latest for us from the launch pad is our reporter Zheng Yibing. He's live there at the Wenchang Spacecraft Launch Site in South China's Hainan province. Good to see you there, Yibing. So mission specialists have been performed the last-minute checks, the final checks on the ship as well as the rocket. And the launch is now counting down to its final phase. Tell us how things are going there.
Well, yes, Mom, here at the launch site, everyone is counting down and looking forward to the lift-off just a few minutes from now, because this is the first launch mission for China's Tiangong space station after it went into the operation phase. And it will send a large amount of supplies, like you said, larger than ever, to the space station, to the taikonauts, and to the experimental modules. And their total weight, according to the official figure, is about 5.8 tons, covering life supplies, propellants, and experimental devices and samples. So it covers the mission, like the expert we interviewed said, a transitioning mission linking to the future. Now, what do we see here? Right behind me is a launch pad with the 7th Long March 7 carrier rocket. It carries the 6th Tianzhou cargo ship, the biggest ever cargo ship built by China's aerospace industry. The launch sequence is proceeding, and although the weather in recent days are not good, it is changing for good, and there has been the constant thunderstorms before today. And based on our experience just a year ago when the Tianzhou-4 cargo ship was launched from here, both weather conditions are quite similar. So after the completion of the refueling process in the last rehearsal yesterday morning, the staff here are quite confident. Now the launch control sequence is initiated. We're counting down to the lift-off, and we send the best wishes to this mission. Back to you, Mamang.
And certainly we do hope the weather will hold. It looks now like all systems go. Thank you so much, our Zheng Yibing, for us from the launch pad. In the meantime, CGTN's Zheng Chunying tells us more about some details on the Tianzhou-6 cargo spacecraft.
The Tianzhou-6 cargo ship is actually the most capable space cargo ship currently in service. And let me walk you through some of the key figures here. Weighing 13.5 tons in total, the Tianzhou-6 will be the first cargo craft of its series to boost its loading capacity from 6.9 tons to 7.4 tons. It'll carry 700 kilograms of propellant for the CSS. And the cargo spacecraft consists of two parts. The larger cargo module has a storage capacity of 20% bigger than the previous Tianzhou-5. And it will also carry more than 700 kilograms of materials for scientific experiment on board the space station. And the Tianzhou-6 cargo ship also contains some daily necessities for the astronauts. There's about 70 kilograms of fresh fruit to be delivered, and roughly twice the weight of that carried up by the Tianzhou-5 craft.
That's my colleague Zheng Chunying for us there. And now here in our studio is Professor Yang Yuguang. He is Vice Chair of the Space Transportation Committee of the International Astronautical Federation. Always great to have you with us, Professor, on our program. So we're just minutes away from blast-off, and all things final preparations are complete, just waiting for that big moment. Help us understand the significance of this launch mission.
This is really a very important mission for the operation phase, as Yibing and Ting has already mentioned. You know, that's during the technology demonstration phase and during the construction phase, we do have some uncertainty in the design and also in some of the very special cases in outer space. So we remain some resources to the platform or the bus, the spacecraft bus itself. Today, you can see as as Yibing and Trin has already mentioned, the proportion of the payload has already increased from 6.9 tons to 7.4 tons. So this is a really great challenge for technicians. You see that the mission profile is very complex, from the ground to the outer space, and then orbit maneuver to the space station, and then docking. So this is really complex, and to increase the payload, it is very meaningful, but also raise some technology risky for the mission itself.
Right, 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes now from ignition. So you mentioned this 20% increase in payload. What does that mean in China's future missions?
It means that it can have more resources remain for the scientific research instruments, and also you see that the capacity is the capability is also increased. So there are more proportion of payload, including those not only for the daily life and also for the scientific research. So it brings more chances for China and other countries.
And now our space scientists there are keeping a close eye on the weather in that area, because there has been frequent showers, as Yibing just mentioned. Things were getting windy. Will that hamper our launch mission?
That's a very important factor for the launch. You see that the wind is much stronger in Wenchang Satellite Launch Site rather comparing with 9 Satellite Launch Site. So we must compare.
1 minute countdown.
Yeah, T-minus 1 minute and counting. So at this moment, we can see from the video of the launch pad, and the white vapors have almost disappeared. It means that the fueling procedure has already ended. You see from this figure, the launch vehicle is using the propellant for the cryogenic propulsion system.
40 seconds countdown.
Exactly.
So this mission is expected to resupply the Tiangong space station, and it will be the first such mission after it was completed last November. Less than 30 seconds.
You can see all the rotational platforms have already been withdrawn
and
from the vehicle.
Scientists there are really holding their breaths for the blast off. Now 10 seconds countdown.
6、5、4、3、2、1，点火！
Ignition. Blast off.
6 engines, 6 YF-100 engines ignite at the same moment. 4 on the boosters with 1 engine each, and then 2 engines in the core stage. And at this moment, the first critical action will be the pitch over, which means that it change its direction from going upward to the east, southeast direction.
So when can we expect this Tianzhou mission, the spacecraft, to be docked with our Tiangong space station?
That depends on the plan, the mission of the mission profile. Usually, during the last Tianzhou mission, we make a world record about 2 more hours from the liftoff to the docking. Maybe several hours. It depends on the design of the mission itself. And at this moment, you can see the video from the camera mounted on the fuselage of the vehicle itself. And you can see the 2 boosters.
And it looks like a bit cloudy in that area, and this
not very heavy. You can still see the flame of the first stage.
It's gradually fading away from our side. It's getting farther away.
Yeah. And also from the video cameras in the ground stations, we can monitor the trajectory of the vehicle itself. And also we have readers to monitor the trajectory. And we also have the sensors on board the vehicle itself. Now you can see the video that, as I mentioned, the camera mounted in the fuselage of the vehicle, and you can see the 2 boosters and the flame of the rocket engines.
It gives us different angles and different perspectives to see this mission up close.
And the next critical step will be the separation of the 4 boosters. You can see that soon, about less than 3 minutes.
Right. And this moment reminds us of the Tianzhou-6 mission, and that you mentioned to me just now, that it made records in being the fastest mission to be connected with the Tiangong.
Yeah. And you can see the flame has the shape of the flame has already changed because it's already almost in a vacuum condition.
Right,
because
isn't that amazing to see how the flames and how the color of it changes as they go up higher? So
it uses kerosene and liquid oxygen as the propellant. You can see the flame is a little bit blue color.
Right. So again, what is on board this Tianzhou-6 mission? We mentioned there's going to be fuel, a lot of food. What are some of the other supplies?
As I mentioned, the scientific research instruments and also some backup parts for the life support system of our Tiangong space station, and also some parts maybe for the spacesuits. You know that for each time we conducted an EVA. Oh, you can see that the boosters are already separated.
Right, separation space.
So the next step will be the separation of the first stage.
So the rocket boosters are now being released and they've detached from the main body of the rocket?
Great. The first stage also separated.
Right.
Okay, you can see that the second stage has already ignited very normally.
Right. Well, this process is, of course, crucial in sending large vehicles into space and helping protect the payload.
And the next, as you mentioned, the next step will be the jettisoning of the payload fairing, because it is already out of the atmosphere. Oh, this is a camera inside the payload fairing.
Right.
You can see the great.
Now the fairing is separating.
Jettisoned.
And then there will come the first stage separation.
This is already, which means that the altitude is already high enough and do not have much aerodynamic forces acting on the body. So it do not need the payload fairing and to save the energy.
So the rocket itself has the power to push itself against the atmosphere. Is that correct?
It has the power, but the aerodynamic forces acting on the spaceship is already low enough because strong aerodynamic forces will damage the spaceship.
So as we watch very closely on this launch mission, the 3 taikonauts on board the Tiangong space station, they are also anticipating new supplies because we understand that this mission will resupply them with the final weeks of their mission on board the Tiangong space station. They've been up there for some 5 months already.
Usually for any astronauts, either the ISS or China's Tiangong space station, the visiting of the cargo ship will be the happiest time for them because the fresh food arrived.
You've got parcel.
And also gifts from family members.
Oh, they have that on board as well?
Exactly. And also, you know that probably our Shenzhou-15 crew are also watching the live coverage. Probably.
They have access to our CGTN or some other?
Actually speaking, the flight center.
Flight center.
Yeah. You know that we have the Tianlian data relay satellite. It has very high speed and can transmitting the videos from the ground to the station. So they not only watching the live coverage of the rocket launch, but also you know that during the Winter Olympic Games and during the Olympic Games, they can also watch the all kinds of matches.
Sure. What are some of the preparations that they are making to welcome their new supplies and to welcome the Tianzhou-6 to dock with the Tiangong?
It's really complex. You see that for the docking, even the docking technology is already very practical, but still a very risky operation. So the attitude, the orbit of the Tiangong space station must in the right position. And moreover, you see that you know that the Tianzhou cargo ship needs several orbit maneuvers and all conducted automatically. So we must monitor its status, and finally we have the final approach. Must be well monitored by not only those on the ground, our ground staff, and also monitored by the Tiangong space station. We also have the sensors to measure the relative distance, the relative angle, and also relative attitude of each vehicle.
As we speak now, Professor, help us understand where this rocket is. What's the altitude at this moment?
This moment is flying above the Pacific Ocean. Actually speaking, maybe to the east of the Philippines, I believe. And at this moment, it's already, you know, that's several minutes already passed. It's already high enough, already much higher than 100 kilometers. So I believe it's already near to close its 2 fixed engines. You see there are 4 engines on the second stage. You can see 2 of them from the left screen, from the camera. And two fixed engines will be shut down first, and then the other two vernier engines.
Yeah. Well, if you've just joined us, this is our special coverage, live coverage of the launch of China's latest Tianzhou-6 mission. This is a cargo spacecraft. It will resupply astronauts with their fuel, food, and everyday necessities on board the Tiangong space station. And this is the first such mission to take place since China's Tiangong space station was completed last November.
As I mentioned, on the second stage, we have 4 rocket engines called YF-115. Each has a thrust about 18 tons, and the 2 of them on the opposite direction will be shut down first to decrease the thrust. And with a smaller thrust, the accuracy will increase. So that is the reason we use this operation. And then the 2 vernier engines will finally adjust its trajectory to make it accurate enough.
One highlight of this mission is the increased payload.
Yeah.
We mentioned there's a 20% increase, but where does that increase come from? For example, is the spacecraft itself larger than its predecessor, or how do you allocate space?
As Chen Ying has already mentioned, the total mass is still 13.5 tons, metric tons. So the total mass has not changed. The increase of the payload comes from the decrease of the platform itself. Because it's become more and more practical, we can remain less resources to the platform itself. So more resources will remain for the payload. So that is the reason why we can have this the highest ratio or the highest proportion of payload, effective payload among all cargo ships of a human being.
Okay. What does this increased payload mean for China's future missions? For example, will that mean less frequency in the launch of cargo spacecraft?
Exactly. And also there are other options to have more scientific research experiments. So both are very possible, and also it can reduce the cost.
And of course, our taikonauts will be better off there when they carry out their missions.
Yeah, as you mentioned, maybe more fresh fruit.
There were some reports about the possibility of sending a big refrigerator up there to the Tiangong space station to make sure that our taikonauts there have,
okay, you can see that the fixed engines are already shut down.
Right.
Yeah. So next will be the shutdown of the vernier engines.
This is the first stage separation?
No. It's still the second stage.
Okay.
As I mentioned, there are 4 engines on board the second stage. 2 will be shut down. Already shut down the first 2 engines, and then the other 2 engines. Okay. The vernier engine also. So the next step will be separation. Great.
Separation.
You can see the video from the second stage, the separation of the cargo ship itself.
So now we can see the Long March 7Y7 rocket is detaching from the Tianzhou-6 capsule, and we've been hearing applause from the control center.
And from this video, you can see that the attitude control engines on the Tianzhou cargo ship is already working.
So is the Tianzhou-6 approaching its way into orbit?
It's already in orbit.
It's in orbit, and it's doing that all on its own.
Exactly. And the next critical step for Tianzhou-6 is to unfolding of its
solar panels.
Yeah.
And that will provide it with
continuous
energy to
supply.
continue it on this journey.
And after this launch procedure, the Tianzhou-6 will conduct several orbital maneuvers to change its orbit and adjust its relative position with Tiangong space station.
Right.
And finally, it will close to less than 50 kilometers, and then an autonomous final approaching and also conducting the docking.
So we were looking at live signal from the command center where space scientists are already shaking hands. We are now 12 minutes after blast off, and usually we will be waiting for officials there announcing the success of the launch.
Yes, but you know that just before the announce of the success of the launch, we need to do some critical steps.
Sure.
The most important one is to measure and verify the accuracy of the orbital parameters of the Tianzhou cargo ship. This is very critical. You know that the basic requirement to the launch itself is to that the orbital plane of the Tianzhou-6 must be the same comparing with the Tiangong space station. So this is very critical for our launch. So that is the reason why we must conduct a checking of the accuracy of the orbital parameters to make sure that it is accurate enough for the successive operations.
Sure.
And you know that the accuracy of the...
And we can now see the Tianzhou-6 is stretching out its solar panels.
Yes, so this is a 3D animation, but this animation is driven by real data, which means that it represents the real status of the Tianzhou cargo ship itself.
Is there any delay setting back the signal?
They do have some delays, very, very professional. So although have delay, but it's maybe only several seconds. So we have telemetry data emitted from the vehicle itself to the ground station, and the ground station will send this data to the control center. So in the control center, the 3D animation will represent the based on these parameters received from the vehicle.
Right. So this is the launch of China's Tianzhou-6 mission. This is a cargo spacecraft that will resupply China's Tiangong space station up and running. And the 3 taikonauts on board will be welcoming in their new supplies, their experiment equipment, as well as fresh food, which will supply them, keep them going for the final weeks of their mission. They've already been up there for 5.5 months, and we have a new batch of astronauts, a 3-person crew going up there later this month.
You can see from the left of the screen is Tianzhou cargo ship. It has 2 parts, the cargo bay, or the bigger cylindrical part, and on the rear part is the propulsion module. This time, the difference from the previous mission is that the cargo bay is bigger. So it's, as you mentioned, the 20% larger in volume. And the propulsion module is become smaller than before. So the total length is still 10.6 meters, and the total mass is still 13.5 metric tons. So it not changed, but the efficiency has raised.
Right. So with limited space, there has to be a trade-off in what you want to carry and how much you want to carry.
Quite right. So it do not, because the orbit maneuver procedure has already been very, very practical, so we don't need so much propellants compared with the previous missions. So only a limited amount of propellants are used for this mission. And moreover, even some of the propellants will be pulling to the station.
Right, you mentioned there's going to be a resupply part.
The fueling, yeah. So the cargo also not only including those objects in the cargo bay, but also some propellants. It is very interesting. This time, the difference from the previous mission, the resupply also including some of the propellants for the electric thrusters on board the station. You know that China's Tiangong space station is the first one in the world that adopted the electric propulsion system. So the xenon is the propellant for this electric propulsion system. So this time also some xenon tanks will brought to the station and filled to the Tiangong space station for the what we call the Hall effect thrusters, which has very, very high efficiency comparing with the chemical reaction rocket engines.
Sure. Professor, correct me if I'm wrong. So will the taikonauts on the Tiangong space station be welcoming in more food but less fuel? Is that the idea?
Quite right. Okay. More fruit, and more gifts, and more scientific research instruments, and less propellants, because we don't need so much propellants than before.
But propellants are also a very critical part of
very
the
critical,
mission
but
in
you know
space.
that we do have sufficient propellants for the orbit maneuver of the whole station. But according to the experience we got during the first 2 years of operation, we've already can ensure we don't need so much propellants. So the the propellant tanks has already been smaller than before, and also the total length of the propulsion module is smaller than before. So that is the reason why we can have more effective payload.
So experiences tell us that this mission is less energy consuming than what we had anticipated.
Quite right.
All right. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on our special coverage of the launch of China's Tianzhou-6 mission. And we are now 16 minutes away from the launch moment. I want to get your assessment on the overall preparation of this launch. Why did the space scientists were so devoted and so dedicated to this mission?
You know, that's during the technology demonstration phase from 2020 to 2022, and during the construction phase, we paid more attention to the station or the platform itself. We must verify many new technologies facing the challenges of the uncertainties, but this time we can pay more attention to the scientific research itself, because we've already mastered these technologies, and also the whole mission procedure becomes more and more practical. So there do have some uncertainties, but much less than before. So that is the reason we have the chance, we have the resources, and we have the volume for the scientific research payloads this time.
And from previous experiences, usually officials on the ground will be announcing the success of the mission about 20 minutes after launch. Can we expect the same to happen this time?
I don't think this is 100% necessary. You see, as I mentioned, we need to measure the accuracy of the orbital parameters of the Tianzhou cargo ship. We have the ground stations, we also have the Tianlian data relay satellite, and we also have the Beidou navigation satellite constellation. But we do need the receiving the data emitted from the telemetry system of the Tianzhou cargo ship, and then combine all these data to get the final result and get the conclusion whether the accuracy is good enough. Only under these circumstances we can announce that it is a successful launch.
Then to follow up on that question, Professor, what could go wrong before officials announce the success of the mission?
We have the example from the United States. You see that during the maiden flight of the Starliner spaceship, because you know it missed the chance to conduct our orbit maneuver, and because of this, it lost the chance to dock with the International Space Station, because it needs a very strict requirement for the orbital parameters. So anything wrong happened to the, even if it already entered the orbit, if it is not accurate enough, it do not have the chance to dock with its object.
All right. And now, Professor, let's take a look at this together. The chief designer of the Tianzhou cargo ship for China's space station has spoken to CGTN reporter Zheng Yibing exclusively about the new group of the spacecraft. Take a listen to this.
Tianzhou-6 is the first spacecraft for China's space station during the station's application development stage. It's a very important transition, requiring no mistakes. It is also the first in the modified group of Tianzhou cargo ships, codenamed from 6 to 11. There are two eminent features for them. First, its solid cabin has larger space and carrying capacity. Second, its operation platform has been optimized for low cost and higher reliability. Its previous cargo module was 5.5 metric tons, and now it's 6.7, an increase of 1.2 tons and equivalence of 20% capacity. That's a big improvement based on the interior design without changing its appearance.
So as to this mission, what kind of the payloads the Tianzhou-6 cargo ship would carry, and what are these main targets?
There are no big differences in cargo categories. There are still three. One is materials to support the lives and work of the taikonauts. One is to support the operation of the space station, like propellants and maintenance and repair parts. And one is experimental devices. But their proportions have obvious changes. During the application stage, the experimental devices, samples, and facilities take up a pretty big percentage in the cargoes of the Tianzhou spacecraft. And those supplies for taikonauts are mainly for the upcoming Shenzhou-16 crew, and these supplies will meet the needs of 3 taikonauts for 9 months. So it means that supplies for 1 month would serve as backup.
From Tianzhou-1 to Tianzhou-6 and beyond, can you share with us your feeling about the development of the cargo ships?
Among them, Tianzhou-1 and 2 belong to a group with 2 serving as backup. Tianzhou-1 docked with the Tiangong 2 space lab, and Tianzhou-2 made adaptation to dock with the core module space station. Tianzhou-3, 4, and 5 were in the same group, and now Tianzhou-6 till 11 are in the same group. In the future, we will make 6 ships in the same group and will not make big changes because this will increase our efficiency. We have begun to design the following group, like Tianzhou-12. We're finding what needs to be improved. The planning itself is diverse. For example, we're planning a completely sealed ship, and we'll have both half-sealed and open cargo ships. We'll keep innovation and improve our service. Our position is to serve the space station, and we will make better cargo ships.
Well, you've been involved in China's aerospace for decades. So can you share with us your feelings about participation into it?
I think China's aerospace cause, including the manned space program, relies on its own efforts. This is very important. We have achieved stable development despite difficulties from outside. This is because we have our own technologies, our plans, and control risks in development. I think it's very important.
So, as we mentioned just now, the Tianzhou-6 cargo ship is carrying equipment for a total of 29 science experiments that will be conducted on board the China space station. The life science experiments are drawing a particular amount of attention with 2 human stem cell projects included for the first time in the station. And now let's hear some more on that.
We had 3 live projects on board the Tianzhou-6 cargo ship when it was in Beijing in March. They're to study the effects of radiation on life outside the spacecraft. The 2 stem cell projects we loaded here in Wenchang are to study the effects of microgravity on life in the capsule. The previous Tianzhou-5 cargo ship also had 2 cell projects. Although the experimental equipment of both missions may look similar, the jobs are very different due to the different research objects. For example, our 2 stem cell projects this time use human embryonic stem cells. They aim at finding the impacts of the spatial space environments on humans when they travel or work in space, like in the microgravity environment and the radiation environment. We need to find out first about these effects, and then we will research and develop the relevant technologies to prevent or treat these special effects.
Well, Professor, as the Tianzhou-6 is now in orbit, trying to make this rendezvous with our Tiangong space station, I want to know what is the expected duration that it will stay in space?
Usually, that the Tianzhou cargo ship is not only act as a resupply ship for the Tiangong space station, but also act as a dustbin for the Tiangong space station. Usually, that for the daily life, not only we common people, but also the astronauts will produce many waste every day. So all these waste, this rubbish will stored in the Tianzhou cargo ship. When it's detached from the space station and finally deorbiting at the South Pacific region, it will put these waste into the atmosphere and burn out. So this is the reason why the Tianzhou cargo ship will dock to the Tiangong space station usually more than 5 months. And also, it is very interesting this time, that this time the Tianzhou-6 cargo ship will dock to the rear docking port of the Tiangong space station. We just freed by the Tianzhou-5 just several days before.
So but Tianzhou-5 has already been separated from the space station. Where is it right now?
It's already separated, but still in orbit and waiting. And after after handover of the Shenzhou-15 and the Shenzhou-16 crew, the front docking port will be freed by the Shenzhou-15 after the detach of the Shenzhou-15. And at this moment, the Tianzhou-5 will move to the front part and then dock again to the front docking port. So at this moment, China will make another record for itself, the largest combination ever been made. So this combination will reach to about 110 metric tons. Also another record for China. That the Tianzhou cargo ship is a little bit heavier than the Shenzhou spaceship. So 2 Tianzhou cargo ships docked to the combination.
Yeah. So you also mentioned just now that the Tianzhou-5 mission, it had a propellant of number of tanks and containing propellant was 8, and this time it's been reduced to 4. Why was this adjustment made?
No. The number of tanks has already changed from the 8 to 4 during the Tianzhou-3 mission. since the Tianzhou-3 mission, because you know that the Tianzhou-1 and the Tianzhou-2 belongs to the first batch. Both have 8 propellant tanks, and from the Tianzhou-3 to Tianzhou-5 belongs to the second batch, has the same status. And from as mentioned by the chief designer, Mr. Bai Mingsheng, the Tianzhou-6 to Tianzhou-11 belongs to the third batch. So in this batch, each spacecraft has similar specifications. And during this, as we already discussed, because of we have already mastered the technologies, our experience becomes more and more practical. So we can confirm now we don't need so much propellants, and the tanks we don't need so much propellant tanks. But as I mentioned, we also not only we have the chemical propellant, we also have the propellant, the xenon, for the electric thrusters.
Yeah. All right, now some more information about the Tianzhou-6. This cargo ship gears up to send more supplies to the Shenzhou-15 crew. And CGTN Sun Ye has some more on the operation of the space station and what the crews have accomplished so far.
For the first few months since China's space station officially entered into long-term operation, its occupants, the Shenzhou-15 crew who oversaw its completion, described their time as busy, busy, busy in their video diaries. They've completed 4 spacewalks so far, more than previous Shenzhou crews. And on their walks, they've installed equipment for extravehicular scientific as well as other experiments. China's space station can now produce 100% of its own oxygen supply through its onboard regeneration system. And with the National Space Lab powered up, the space station has performed its first ignition experiment earlier this year, with over 40 such experiments to be completed by the end of 2023.
The Shenzhou-15 crew successfully obtained the 3-dimensional structural images of their skin cells with the country's self-developed 2-photon microscope.
And China's space station has enjoyed relatively calm space weather over the past few months, and scientists on the ground say it's prepared for any possible changes in conditions.
When designing the space station, changes in space weather are taken into account. We've accumulated a lot of experience in dealing with space weather events and have taken corresponding protective measures. Our laboratory began using this device to simulate and study the environment around the space station as early as 2015. And as the space station enters long-term operation, our work continues. In the near future, just like weather forecasts on the ground, we hope there will be space weather forecasts that predict the impact of space weather on Earth, as well as the space station and other spacecraft.
After the Long March 7 carrier rocket launches the Tianzhou-6 cargo ship to the space station, the Shenzhou-16 crew are expected to arrive at the outpost to take over from the Shenzhou-15 crew in a month or so, with the latter returning to Earth, safe in the knowledge they've made history. Sun Ye, CCTV, Beijing.
So, Professor, besides the spacecraft itself, are there any other bits of new technologies deployed in this mission?
Exactly. You see that we not only have the payload inside our cargo ship, but also we have experimental payload outside the cargo ship. You know that many of the experiments should be conducted outside the vehicle, not only those mounted on the Tiangong space station, but you know that during the flight, the whole mission profile of the Tianzhou cargo ship, there is a very important phase called the independent flying phase, either from the ground to the station or after it is detached from the space station. This is also a very good opportunity to conduct many scientific research. And during this phase, some of the experimental payloads were mounted outside station. You may notice that during, just between the 2 cylindrical parts, there were also a cone-shaped compartment of the cargo ship. There do have some payload mounted on this. Some of my friends from the China Academy of Science have their payload on this part, so to conduct the scientific research. So this is also a very meaningful work. And also, you know, that's the returns from this Tianzhou cargo ship not only comes from the delivering goods to the astronaut, but also comes from the other operations in orbit.
I still want to ask you about the fruits. This is a long flight, and the supplies will be stored in the Tiangong space stations for a long time, 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
how do they store the fresh fruits?
This fruit, honestly speaking, this fruit was stored in room temperature, but well processed on the ground. So to kill the bacteria inside and other processes, it can be stored in outer space for more than a year even. And also, you know that during the first two missions, I mean the Shenzhou-12 and the Shenzhou-13 missions, we only have apples. But for
and this
the
time?
So each day after each meal they can have an apple. But you know that after the Shenzhou-13 mission we can have other choices. So this is also.
What's that offer this time?
Well, that depends on the choice, maybe from the astronaut system itself. But you know that this means that this is also a very important technology to store the right food for the astronauts for their daily life. You know, this is not only meaningful from the aspect of nutrition, but also from the aspect of psychology. To have more food, more fruit for the astronauts. And even you know that it is very interesting, after every EVA and other very challenging operations, they may have some special reward, including some special food prepared for the astronauts.
Right, sure, yeah. The pressure are all on the astronauts to take
exactly.
the EVA and they're by themselves up there.
So the food, as you mentioned, so the food is not only very important for their daily life, but also for their happiness.
Sure, psychological health is also very important. So. Again, we mentioned the human stem cell just now. That's part of the science experiments that's being brought up there on this Tianzhou-6 mission. Are these equipment for this crew or the next crew who are going to go up
Probably
there?
Most scientific researchmen will be deployed and be conducting the scientific experiment by the Shenzhou-16 crew and even the Shenzhou-17 crew. You know, that's as we've already discussed, this Tianzhou-6 mission can have more payload than before. So it can support not only the daily life, but the scientific research for not more than half a year. So this is maybe this Tianzhou-6 cargo ship will stay longer on board the Tiangong space station, because you know that the Shenzhou-16 crew will also stay in station for half a year. Yeah. But after that, they do have, as we already talked a lot about the fruit, 70 kilograms of fresh fruit. So this is also prepared for the Shenzhou-16 crew, but also for the Shenzhou-17 crew.
That could keep them going for a long time.
Quite right.
Thank you so much, Professor Yang. As we still wait for some good news from the Aerospace Command Center, we're going to wrap up our show for this hour. So that's going to do it for this hour, our special coverage of the Tianzhou-6 mission. We'll be getting back to you in just a moment. Beijing, this is the world today. I'm Wang Mengmao. China's Tianzhou-6 cargo ship has entered orbit and is now waiting to dock with the China's space station. The cargo ship was launched at 21:22 p.m. Beijing time, carried by the Long March 7 Y6 rocket from the Wenchang Spacecraft Launch Site. It is the first spaceflight since China's space station fully commenced operations last year. It contains a 22.5 cubic meter cargo compartment with 50 lockers to place daily necessities for astronauts, equipment needed for in-orbit experiments, and also propellants. Now, the supplies on board include 70 kilograms of fresh fruits, about twice the amount delivered by the Tianzhou-5 cargo ship. The Tianzhou-6 cargo craft is the first of a new batch of China's cargo ships from Tianzhou-6 to Tianzhou-11 to boost their loading capacity from the previous 6.9 tons to 7.4 tons. Chinese Foreign Minister Tiangong has met with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Beijing. Scholz said he looks forward to holding the 7th round of Germany-China governmental consultations in Germany. Scholz says that as the host country, Germany is actively seeking results from its joint efforts with China. He said Germany attaches great importance to China's role and influence and is willing to strengthen communication with China on the Ukraine conflict and other major issues. Now, Tiangong said the international community should step up cooperation and join hands to meet challenges. He said China and Germany should enhance dialogue and cooperation and added that China's position on the Ukraine conflict is to promote peace. Tianzhou-6 cargo ship has entered orbit and is now waiting to dock with the China space station. The cargo ship was launched at 9:22 p.m. Beijing time, carried by the Long March 7 Y6 rocket from the Wenchang Spacecraft Launch Site. It is the first spaceflight since China's space station fully commenced operations last year. It contains a 22.5 cubic meter cargo compartment with 50 lockers to place daily necessities for astronauts, equipment needed for in-orbit experiments, and also propellants. The supplies on board include 70 kilograms of fresh fruits, about twice the amount delivered by the Tianzhou-5 cargo ship. Now, the Tianzhou-6 cargo craft is the first of a new batch of China's cargo ships from Tianzhou-6 to Tianzhou-11 to boost their loading capacity from the previous 6.9 tons to 7.4 tons. My colleague Zheng Chunying tells us more about some details of the Tianzhou-6 cargo spacecraft.
The Tianzhou-6 cargo ship is actually the most capable space cargo ship currently in service. And let me walk you through some of the key figures here. Weighing 13.5 tons in total, the Tianzhou-6 will be the first cargo craft of its series to boost its loading capacity from 6.9 tons to 7.4 tons. It'll carry 700 kilograms of propellant for the CSS. And the cargo spacecraft consists of two parts. The larger cargo module has a storage capacity of 20% bigger than the previous Tianzhou-5, and it will also carry more than 700 kilograms of materials for scientific experiment on board the space station. And the Tianzhou-6 cargo ship also contains some daily necessities for the astronauts. There's about 70 kilograms of fresh fruit to be delivered, and roughly twice the weight of that carried up by the Tianzhou-5 craft.
For the cargo supply missions to China's Tiangong space station, the Long March 7 carrier rocket plays an important role. CGTN reporter Zheng Yibing has this exclusive report on the launch vehicle from the Wenchang Spacecraft Launch Site.
This is now the first time I see the Long March 7 carrier rocket here, but this is the first time I see it carrying the mission of the application and development stage of China's space station. A senior designer introduced the logo for this mission to us.
It shows a very impressive scene when the rocket flies through the clouds, and the spacecraft design here represents its payloads and mission.
For this mission, the cargo spaceship Tianzhou-6 increased the lift-off weight of 500 kilograms. And its carrier rocket Long March 7 would keep the same launch capacity and precision to send payloads into orbit.
Since its maiden flight in 2016, the rocket has been getting more stable and precise in flight. With these developments, we keep updating the technology and making progress.
Based on its predecessors like the Long March 2F for manned missions, the Long March 7 is designed specifically for cargo supplies to low Earth orbit of some 400 kilometers above the Earth. The design adopts the modular research and development and has the advantage of reliability and relatively low cost.
As new types are derived, like the Long March 8 and the Long March 7A, this helps us realize a graded distribution of carrying capacity of rockets to different space levels.
For Lu Jianqiang and many other team members, the rocket is like their child, and they're glad to see it grow and mature, especially for the first flight for the operation phase of China's space station.
As the member of the main rocket of cargo supplies, we must make sure its progress, precision, and high quality and effectiveness for each mission, to lay a good foundation for the station and offer very good support for astronauts in space.
Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Wenchang.
And now let's get some more analysis for our special coverage. We have in the studio Professor Yang Guang, Vice Chair of the Space Transportation Committee of the International Astronautical Federation. Professor, it's been almost an hour since the launch moment. So tell us about the current status of the rocket, please, of the Tianzhou-6 spacecraft.
Well, you know that we've already discussed about the propellant just in use. You know that after the launch of the Tianzhou-6 already come into the orbit, it's not the final orbit of the Tianzhou-6. Finally, it will dock with the Tiangong space station, which means that it will finally in the same orbit. And before that, it will conduct many orbit maneuvers, many based on the autonomous or the automatic maneuver completely depends on the vehicle itself. So this will reduce the burdens of the ground staff. And also, that this is a more advanced behavior compared with missions before. That during, yes, you can still remember that about 10 years before, we have the live coverage of the launch and of the docking of the spacecraft to the Tiangong laboratories. But at that moment, we use a different manner. All the orbit maneuvers were designed were by the ground staff and conducted in the monitoring by the ground staff. But this time, and also the former several missions, we depend on the vehicle itself. So this is also evidence that our technology becomes more and more practical, and our designers become more and more confident than before.
Sure, how time flies, and China really has come a long way in its space exploration program.
Quite right.
So just to help our viewers who just joined us to understand some of the technical highlights of the Tianzhou-6 mission, please.
So, that's the 500 kilograms of the payload increased comparing with the previous mission. Not only means that we have an advanced status of the Tianzhou cargo ship itself, but also means that we bring more chance for the scientists and also the engineers. That during the missions before, mainly we paid more attention or may remain more resources to the, especially, that's the environmental control and the life support system, which means that we must bring many water, many resupplies to the station for the daily life to keep their life of the astronauts in orbit.
Basic
exactly.
Necessities.
But today we have already mastered this technology very, very precisely. That the oxygen can be 100% recycled. And even for water, it's already we have achieved the rate about 95%, which means that we don't need to resupply so much oxygen and water. So only some additional resupplies of water we needed, which means that we can have more volume, more payload mass for the scientific research, and also for other purposes, for instance, outreach. And we can have these kind of objects, instruments for outreach for the Tiangong class. So this is also very, very meaningful for the future. And also, as we already discussed, for the international cooperation to benefit the whole world, to benefit the scientists and engineers from other countries.
Sure, because I know international cooperation is also your field. You go to a lot of the meetings, international ones, and talk to astronauts and space scientists. The Tiangong space station is the first project of its kind that opened to all UN member states. And right now, there are already 9 projects involving 17 countries and 23 entities selected among the first batch of scientific experiments to be carried out on the station. What is the future prospects for that?
Well, you can pay some attention to the procedure. Much simpler than before. That the first high-level cooperation between China and other countries is what we call the Double Star program. And our old friends, Mr. Carl Crest, an official from the European Space Agency, were also engaged in this project just several decades before. But that at that moment, we don't have a space station for this kind of the payload from other countries. We need to set up an independent project and design an independent satellite platform and mount this payload on it. So you can see how complex it is. Today, it's become much, much more simpler than before. The foreign countries, the foreign scientists just deliver their applications to the UN or just deliver to China Manned Space Agency. And then if anything is feasible, they only need to talk about the interface between the space station and their payload, and then design and manufacture their payload, then delivered based on the Tianzhou cargo ship to the China Space Station. Then the experiments can be conducted by the astronauts. So simple, much simpler than before. So this brings a very, very great chance for us, and also not only for the Chinese scientists, but also for the scientists all over the world, as you mentioned, all the UN members. So although the first batch of the 17 experiments were only the 9 experiments were only selected from 17 countries, but 23 entities involved. So in the future, we can see more and more frankly, we can see these kind of cooperation between China and other countries, because it's become much, much more easier than before.
Streamlining the procedure.
Yes, exactly. Moreover, you see that the second level we've already talked about also on the social media is the visiting of the astronauts from other countries. Even some some scientists from other countries has mentioned that they will have the plan to visit China's Tiangong Space Station. But of course, we should need the official announcement of China Manned Space Agency. Then who and from which country will first go into the China's Tiangong space station, which will also make history. So in the future, I can definitely we do see we can be sure that we'll see these kind of chances for other countries.
Sure. Well, the International Space Station will possibly retire in 2024, and that will make China's Tiangong space station the only operational space station in the world. Is that?
Probably the ISS will work to until 2030. 2030. So most of the member countries have already agreed with that, and you know that's. Of course, during this period, the China's Tiangong space station will not be the only space station for all human beings. Moreover, you see that just before 2030, the United States will also launch the what we call the Lunar Gateway. Lunar Orbit Gateway, another station far from the Earth. So, so in the future, we can not only see this space station developed by the governments, but also in the future, probably we can see the space station can be developed and launched by the private companies. There are already many companies in other countries has already have this kind of plan. Some for the commercial applications, and some even for the space tourism.
Sure. Well, for viewers who've just joined us, this is our special coverage, and we're now seeing some live signal from the Aerospace Control and Command Center.
Experts, dear colleagues, based on the data from the Y-7 carrier rocket and our calculation, Tianzhou-6 cargo ship has entered into the orbit, the solar panel has been extended, and everything is normal, so I declare our launch is successful. The mission is going on smoothly, and now this is the end of the mission. Thank you.
It's a time to celebrate, because behind the scenes, behind this big moment, we could imagine all the efforts and dedication from these scientists. So going forward, though, Professor, we can expect the Tiangong-6 to dock with the China's Tiangong space station. What will be the future missions going forward?
Well, you know that just within this month, we will have the launch of the Shenzhou-16 manned spaceship. Our Shenzhou-16 crew will meet the Shenzhou-15 crew in orbit. This will be the second time we have the handover of astronauts of different expedition teams in orbit. Will be another historical moment, I believe, just within this month.
Sure, and I believe the 3 Chinese astronauts on board the China space station will be so excited to welcome in that. Thank you so much, Professor, for that.
You're welcome.
All right, that's going to do it for our special coverage of the launch of the